All right, so we have this 2010 Toyota Camry here. Now it has a bunch of lights on the dash right now. This thing's actually in for a safety inspection. And fortunately, all the lights that are on the dash don't fail the safety, but I'm gonna look into this stuff anyways because I'm sure whoever wants to buy it is gonna wanna get these things fixed. Now, we're just doing a scan on it. It has the engine light on, the maintenance light on, which is an American car thing. And this is an American edition car, not Canadian. We are in Canada here. And that's one thing that the Canadian cars don't have is the maintenance light that's over here. Now, it also has the traction control light, TPMS light, ABS light, and I think I told you check engine light. And yeah, it looks like that's about it. Now, I took this thing for a drive and the transmission shifts really harsh. I've never felt one of these cars shift so harsh in my life, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have some transmission codes going on. Just from the scan, let's go through here. We're almost actually done scanning. We see we got this P0328 code, which is a knock sensor 1 circuit high input. Now, immediately when I got in this car, it smelled like mice. And I know from working at Toyota that mice love to eat Toyota wiring. Toyota and Honda, for some reason, the insulation they use on their wiring has a lot of earthy materials, is what I was told in training. And mice love to get in there and eat it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have some wiring that's chewed up, and that's why this knock sensor fault is on here. Let's scroll down the list and see what else we got. ABS, we have a C0210 right rear wheel speed sensor circuit signal fault, and also a C0215, which is the left side rear wheel speed sensor signal fault. Now continuing down the ABS list, we have engine control system fault, too low or too high battery volts. Just from the looks of things, it looks like somebody has put a battery in this. So I'm sure at one point the battery voltage was too low, and that's why it has set that voltage code. C1332 open circuit and right rear wheel speed sensor circuit. I know these things were bad for harnesses. The pins would get corroded sometimes, but I've seen lots of the wheel bearing itself, the internals would go bad. I believe it has a magnet style tone ring that's built into the wheel bearing because these cars were only available in front wheel drive in this body style, the 6th generation. So looks like we have vehicle driven with steering angle sensor not initialized, C1445. That may have something to do with the battery going dead for an extended amount of time. May have just lost its calibration and needs to be initialized. Not 100% sure. Let's keep going down the list here. TPMS transmitter ID number 4 not received. So the battery's dead in one of those TPMS sensors. That's what that code is for. And I'll show you in another video how we can go through and determine which wheel that is, because it says ID number 4, but how do you know if that's number 4 or the back one's number 4? I'll show you guys in another video on how we can do that. Looks like we have that 328. Now it's just giving me generic codes. Snap-on does this. It just shows your OBD2 permanent codes, and it's sort of separate from the other information at the top. Looks like we have our tests. We can see our readiness monitors. Those have all completed. Not completed is catalyst, evaporative emissions, and oxygen sensor. So just looking to see here. What that tells me is the battery recently was hooked up. So it takes a little while once the vehicle gets hooked up and running, say it's dead for a while and you hook it up, the vehicle needs to run its checks, and sometimes it won't run those checks for a while. And me looking at that right then and there tells me that somebody has just hooked the battery up on this. It's been sitting for a while, and now it's come to me and it hasn't run the checks yet. So I know this thing's been dead for a while, and that's why those are on. So let's take a look under the hood and see if we can find anything else. now we're looking underneath of this intake. The knock sensor for this engine is right underneath of that intake on the block. And if you look right up in between there, you'll see a little piece of red. Now, that's the wiring harness that runs the knock sensor. And I'm pretty darn sure that there's been mice in there, because that's where they like to go. And they've chewed through that harness. And that'll be the issue there. I'm sure all it needs is a wiring repair. Unfortunately, it's buried under that intake, so the intake will need to come off in order to do the repair. But hey, I mean, at least it's not actually an internal problem in the engine causing it to knock. And, you know, shouldn't be that expensive. It might be into a set of intake gaskets and a bit of labor. So. All right, so there you go. We got the video scope up inside, underneath the intake manifold. And you can see there's the knock sensor. Both wires are completely chewed off. So we've definitely had some mice in there. They were hungry, ate that wiring right off, right through the copper. Pretty crazy, but I figured that happened. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is determine which tire pressure sensor is in which location. So it had a fault code and it said ID number 2 signal fault. So I know that the battery is probably dead in that sensor, but we don't know which wheel is sensor number 4. So what we're gonna do is we have our scan tool plugged in. You're gonna need a scan tool to do this. And we're gonna go to tire pressure monitor. Okay, it's gonna show us all of our IDs under data display. We wanna see what our tire pressures are reading, what the computer is seeing, right? So we get in here, we can see we have main tire, second tire. So we got 4 register ID codes. Now, some of them have a spare tire, but this vehicle only has 4. Some of the trucks have 5, but this one only has 4. So we want to find our tire pressures. There we go. So we got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now what we're gonna do is just go around and let some air out of the tires. I'm gonna get this set up. And this is gonna determine which tire is what. So I'm gonna start back here. Now before obviously we get doing this, take a look around to make sure that you don't have one wheel that's missing a sensor. We want to look for the obvious at first, but I'm gonna let some air out right now. There, let about 5 pounds out, and it may take a few minutes to register with the computer, you know, the update time for that data to register. And now you can see that which one was drastic? Number 3?
Number 3 and 1.
Number 3 and number 1. So that's strange. Now look at this though. That's an irregularity right there. I don't like that. So something may be up with number 1. Normally, it's sort of an odd thing to happen in the video, of course, but normally this doesn't happen. You'll just have all steady pressures and then it drops. So
want to let more out of that one?
I'm gonna say that one is number 3. I'm now going to go to the driver's front. And you could do this too with adding air as well. You could pump them up to like 44, take them to the max of the pressure on the side of the tire says. Just watch how much air you take out of these things. You don't want to let them go right flat, but I'm going to take quite a bit out of this one.
That's number 2.
That one's number 2, okay. Now I'm going to go around to the passenger front. Take some air out of this one.
That might have been.
I'm guessing that's going to be our tire that we're after. Just to be sure, we're going to undo this one back here and let some air hit. This is the passenger rear tire. Try to go as quick as I can, guys. Keep this video as short as possible.
Number one.
Okay, I'll let just a little bit more air out of the driver's rear, just to 100% confirm and make sure that one is number 3 that we suspected. So it looks like, guys, the passenger front tire is probably the one that is ID number 4 that is not communicating. So this one we were thinking was going to be number 3.
Yep.
Okay, so there we go. So like I say, it's going to take a little bit of time for that data to update. There's a refresh rate from the computer. Basically, these tire pressure sensors are sending a wireless signal to a receiver. The receiver sends the information to the body control module, or whatever module then talks to the scan tool, and the scan tool takes that data and displays it. So it takes a little bit of time, but you get the idea. If you have a scan tool that has the tire pressure monitor function, all you need to do is see the pressures, and you can determine whether you fill up or remove air, which IDs are your tires. And honestly, on my personal vehicle, I would just write on the back of the tire which IDs are what wheels. And that way, when you have a tire pressure fault, it will, you'll be able to determine which wheel it is and go ahead and replace that sensor, because there is batteries in these sensors and they do not last forever, guys. About 7 to 10 years is what you're gonna get out of them. They're a little watch battery, and they do die, and they do need to be changed out. Not the battery themselves, but the whole sensor, because you can't change the battery. So if you have any questions or comments, throw them down in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe.